Welcome back, everybody. Another freezing day here in the UK, but another service that needs doing. So I'm going to crack on with this one. So we've got a Giant Defy in today, one of the slightly older ones, which is nice because all the cables are externally routed. So what we've got going on this one here, we've got both wheels. The hubs have both got issues. You can see grease pouring out there. It needs a new chain that's way past its limit, so we're putting a new cassette on at the same time. Both the tyres have gone past their wear limits, and there's a lot of rattling going on the front. That's the front wheel bearings again. It could be partially the headset, but the front wheel's so bad you can't really tell yet. So let's get her in the stand and see what we've got. So as there's so much needs doing to this, basically I'm going to strip it down to a complete frame first of all. I mean, it sounds excessive, but it's basically 10-15 minutes work. It just makes life a lot easier. Okay, so that took 5 minutes, literally. I will take the seat post out as well to make sure there's no problems in there, not seized or anything. But you can see it just makes life a lot easier. You can give it all a good clean. It is a press fit bottom bracket, but the bearings feel great. So most of the work on this really is going to be around the wheels. So we've got both hubs to service, both tyres to change, and a new cassette on the wheel, new chain, and then just set that up. I think there's new brake pads as well, front and back. We'll get to that later. So yeah, let's crack on with those bits. So basically everything on here is what we're going to be refitting to the bike. New chain, new cassette, clean the forks up, clean the brakes up, new pads front and back, pedals are fine. Front and rear derailleurs are going to go into the ultrasonic cleaner. I say we're going to scrape off most of this rubbish first, split this up and put it into the ultrasonic. The cranks, but again it will get a good clean up first before it goes back on the bike. Chainring's looking really good condition, so that's good. So no obvious damage to the frame. Obviously being a carbon fibre frame, we do inspect for any sort of obvious damage. This one looks in really good shape. It needs a good clean. There's not even any paint damage down here, to be fair. Normally you get a bit of chain suck and the paint's been smashed off there, but it's actually in really good condition. Not sure what year this is, I'll try and find out, but it should clean up almost like new. So let's give this a good clean first, then we can make a start. Yeah, we're just going with Zep cleaner on this one. All over. Give that a minute to do its magic. So that's the bulk of the debris off the frame, so we're just going to go over it now. Again with a finish line showroom polish. Really good shine. A couple of small stubborn bits that we're going to need to just use some car polish on to get rid of. Coming up really nice. Okay, so that's looking really good now. I'll say no damage to it whatsoever, so we can leave the frame for now and move on. I think we're going to start the wheels, and we can get that back in the frame and build up from there. Actually, before we do the wheels, we're going to do the headset. The lower bearing here was supposed to be a cartridge unit, but it's actually collapsed. Putting it together sounds pretty horrendous, so we'll change the bottom bearing. Top one's on the bench, that looks fantastic condition, so we'll just grab a new bearing for this. So headset bearings for bikes are just an absolute nightmare. There's probably 100 different types. I'll try and keep most of them in stock, most of the common ones anyway. Luckily we've got this one in here. So there's 4 different measurements you need to check. You need to check basically the depth of the bearing, the internal ID, and obviously the external ID. And you also need to check the angle, because you have 45 degrees, 36 degrees, or a combination of them too. So there's a different gauge here that you can use. This confirms the angle basically of the tapers in here. This is not the right one, but just to show you what you do. So we do have that correct bearing, luckily. So again, we're just going to use more of the Mobile XHP Treble 2 grease. It's really good for this. It's a nice waterproof, nice and thick, keeps all the water out. Obviously, like I say, they're sealed bearings anyway, but it's good to give a little bit of extra protection from the rain. So that just sits in there. I've already cleaned the frame out. We'll just add a little bit extra on the top. So that's ready. It's carbon steel on this fork as well. Let's just put some more in here, then we can put the top bearing back. I know I've cleaned the frame once and now I've chucked grease all over it, but that's just the way it goes. So top bearing's in good condition, so that's going straight back in as it was. So there. I don't think you can really put too much grease in a headset, to be fair, but it just helps as a seal. Because the actual physical seal of the headset itself is, well, it's pretty much non-existent on most of them. So this just drops on there. Should hold it in place. There's an O-ring in there, so it stops it falling out. If it does fall out, just spin the bike around so it's on its side. Space is back on. We'll clean this up, and then we're going to put the stem back on just to keep it out of the way for now. So with the stem, we're just going to use some fibre grip on the fork steerer itself. It's basically just a paste with some grit, so because you're on a fairly low torque on carbon, it just gives it an extra helping hand to hold itself on properly. So that's enough for there. I'll just put this bar on for now. I'm going to sort all the cables out later and just put this top cap back in. Now it won't fall out. You'll be good. Just setting the preload on here. You rock the bars side to side. You can feel if it's tight enough normally. It's a fraction more. That's good. So we can't set these yet because we don't know the alignment of the wheel. So we will do that later. Just clean up this excess paste. It does squeeze a lot of it back out, but it's a good idea just to remind yourself to tighten those stem bolts up. Last thing you want to do is forget to do that. So I put that on there just to remind myself that they've not been tightened yet. So we're just going to put things in the ultrasonic lab before we make a start on the wheels. Give this chance to sort itself out. Brakes, you just chuck them in whole. It's fine. Derailleur, I've took the jockey wheels off, and again I've put the bolts back in so I know which one goes where, because they are different lengths on this one. Brake and front derailleur. We're not putting the cassette in obviously because we're putting a new one and a new chain. Squeeze these bottle cages in. So it's good to have a nice big ultrasonic so you can basically do everything in one go like this. Obviously the bottom bit is where it gets dirty, so let's just give that a start and make a start on the wheels. So a new cassette and looking at these bearings and a new tyre. So the full works basically. There's a spring missing on there. Let's get cassette off. So cassette tool wise I use this one here. So 11 or 12, obviously this is an 11 sprocket. So it just holds the lower sprocket on there. Show you. It wasn't very tight. 40 Newton meters normally, so that was very loose. And that's off. Nice and easy. So on the cassette, this is an 1128 10-speed cassette, which is actually pretty difficult to get hold of now. You can still get them, but they're very expensive. It's £60 for the replacement cassette. So I have spoken to the customer. I can get a 1228 for less than half that price. And the customer is more than happy to go for that, so saving a few quid, and all we get in there basically, we've gone from 11 to a 12-tooth sprocket, so losing a couple of tenths of a mile an hour on your high-speed gear, but he's fine with that. So there's a spacer on this one as well, so I keep an eye on that. So we've got to look at the bearings. So all this stuff here is basically water that's mixed with the grease in there and made its way past the seal, so it's going to be pretty nasty in there by the looks of it. Let's get this out. Just use a pick just to lift it up, don't stab through the seal. That's somewhere safe. Cone spanner. This is an old-fashioned cup and cone type thing. Right size. There we go. There's a thin washer there that basically holds the seal on. A bit more of a spacer. And then the cone should come out. What you need to do here is get some magnets. Just use 2 of these Park Tool picks. Basically grabs all the bearings before they go all over the floor. This is looking pretty nasty in here. As you can see, yep. Get that out. That's pretty grim. So now we need to basically pull this axle slightly out and use the magnet to grab all the bearings. There we are. So they've definitely seen better days. Same on the other side. You can take this axle straight out now and use the magnet to pull this side out. There should be 9 bearings on each side on this wheel. So on here we need to just pop this seal out so we can see what we're doing. I find the best tool for that is this old-fashioned tyre lever covered in oil at the moment. Just gently pop it out. You don't want to bend it. There we go. That just pops out. So there's all the bits from the wheel. So now what we need to do is clean this up. There will be some wear on here. I know there's going to be, looking at the condition of it. This is unfortunately the only part you can't replace on a cup and cone wheel, generally speaking, is the cup itself. It's pressed into the hub. Spares are not available. I do have a few spares, but generally speaking, they're not available. So if this is particularly badly worn, it's basically a new wheel. So it's not pretty, but I think realistically what we're going to do is we're going to rebuild it up with new bearings and new grease, see how it feels, and just recommend to the customer that ultimately this probably does need a new wheel. I think the front's going to be just as bad because of the amount of play that's in the hub. But obviously a pair of wheels is going to make this repair probably financially not worthwhile doing. So let's see how we can go with this. Just point it back together with some fresh bearings and grease. Other side itself looks fine. Generally speaking, it's normally the non-drive side that fails like that. If it was this side, you can replace the free hub body itself, which comes with a cup, so it's not the end of the world on this one. But literally this is the only one on a bike that basically writes the wheel off. So just looking at this is the drive side. It's totally loose, so that's probably what's caused that ultimately. These should obviously be locked down together, which has enabled it to come very slightly loose and cause all that wear. See the difference between drive a non-drive side. Not good. The cone's pretty bad as well. Well, it's very bad. Again, you can get cones, but there's many different types as well. So to get the right one that's going to fit this seal is challenging. I'm just going to tighten this drive side one up now. This is just a set of clamps. This is already one that I've used for thread, so it is damaged. I have many other sets that are suitable for other uses. So on here, it's a bit of a stupid design because the cone itself is underneath this sort of seal covers type thing. It does have flats on it though, but it's difficult sometimes to get it to as tight as it needs to be. Right, that should be fine now. Okay, let's rebuild with new bearings, new grease, and see what we've got. Okay, so just put some grease in this hub. New bearings here, so 9 bearings in each side. This is the beauty of cartridge bearing hubs, is you never get this issue. Basically, when the bearings wear out, you just pop a new cartridge bearing in there. There's no physical damage to the wheel itself. So you just keep replacing them. But with cup and cone like this, I was say once the cone's gone, game over. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bearings. Bit more grease on the top. Just refit this seal. It's not really a seal. It's just whatever you want to call it. Gently tap this in. Then stops itself. Other side. You can get the seal out on the other side without damaging it. They're very thin metal. They just end up bending and being useless. So just leave that one in. Again, new bearings on this side. Even the other ones are okay, but we're going to change them all anyway. So it's 9 again. 9. Now we've tightened this up, we can go back in gently without knocking the bearings through. Spin that around. Refit this cone. Like I say, it's not going to be absolute. Well, it's certainly not going to be perfect. It's going to be probably pretty horrendous, but I will speak to the customer, see what he wants to do. What I'll probably advise is trying to track down a set of second-hand used cartridge bearing wheels, something like some Mavics. They are fairly easy because this is a rim brake bike. You've got a little bit more on the market. People don't really want them anymore, so they can be available quite cheaply on likes of eBay. So that might be a good option. But this will get him going for now, and obviously I'll advise him that it's got issues. Clean this. This is the excuse of a seal. It's just useless. Pop that back on. That's it. A few more miles yet. He'll live. So what we're going to do now is just refit the new cassette. Just clean this area first, so you can still get to it. Obviously, there's no damage to these spokes. The chain's obviously never been down there, so that's good. Some good news for this wheel. A little bit of grease on the free hub body. They don't really seize, but I think it's probably just best good practice, really. But the problems you normally get are aluminium free hub bodies with steel cassettes. They tend to bind more than anything. The aluminium free hub body is obviously soft, so they tend to bite in and get stuck there. I think that's people's, when they're saying they're seized, that's actually what's realistically happened, is it's bit into the cassette body, so you can't get it off. So you have to knock it backwards and then they come straight off. I've never had one that's actually physically seized on with rust yet. So just put the spacer on, don't forget that, and then we'll just drop the cassette onto it. Look for the big slot there and the corresponding one on the cassette, and it just goes straight on. Lock ring. 40 Newton meters. We're good. Even this axle's pretty rusty, so let's give that a quick clean on the grinder. Just reassemble this quick release. I'm going to put some grease on here. Grease on there and just a little bit of lubrication in the actual pivot itself. Spring on. There is a missing spring, so I've got a new one for that. Drop that through the hub. That's that. So now we just need to change a tyre and just check the wheel's true. Just change this tyre, get the air out. Again, Pedro's tyre levers. Pretty I'll say they're unbreakable. I've broke a few, but generally speaking, probably one of the better ones out there. There's plenty to choose from there. You don't even need one on that, so that's the tyre off. Keep the tube, obviously. Let's grab a new tyre. So we've got some Schwalbe Laguna 225C, same size as what came off. Directional tyre, obviously there is an arrow on there. So line the tyre up with the logo on the wheel. Just go on dead easy. Put that in. I do use a tyre lever because I've got arthritis in my thumb now, so it's making life a bit challenging. Again, if I puncture the tube, I'll just put a new one in. No problem. Here we go. Just pump this up. So that's inflated now. That's 80 psi. And then we'll just check that the wheel is true while it's off the bike. Do that. Okay, so the wheel was nice and straight. So let's just get this back in the frame now. Then we can do the front. The ultrasonic's actually finished now, so we'll probably go through those pieces now. Get them clean, wiped down. And that's in there. Doesn't sound too bad, to be fair. You'd expect a grumbling noise if the bearings were particularly bad, but that sounds okay. I'll live to fight another day. So ultrasonics finished. Again, they've all cleaned up quite nicely. Just going to spray some TFT2 lube on the derailleurs and the brakes. Let that soak itself in for a little bit, just on all the pivots. Get it in there. The brakes itself, don't worry about the pads because we're changing those. Very good. Jockey wheels done. So that's all ready to go back together. That's off the frame for the bottom bracket cable guide. Crankset's cleaned up nicely. Everything's ready to go back on really. Just going to reassemble the rear derailleur. Just a drop of Loctite if possible. G-pulley at the top. That's that one. There's no direction arrow on this one, so it can go either way you want. Put your cage through there and into there. 3mm Allen key. Just take the bolt out that we left in there. The lower one, again, drop of Loctite, jockey wheel. This is a directional one, so we want to be going that way. Just tighten these up. Nice and tight, you don't want these falling out. Literally the last thing you want, but the Loctite obviously helps. It's good. Nice. So this can go back on the frame now and start fitting the other bits. Just a drop of grease on the pivot bolt, because you are doing steel to aluminum. Tighten that up. Make sure the B-stop screw stops against its stop. Just tighten that up. Can't get this Allen key in there. Good. So now's a good time to check whether this is going to line up. You can see now this upper jockey wheel should be lining up with this sprocket. It's actually nowhere near it, so I'm going to back that out, which is this screw for H for high. So that's lined up now with that one. And then we can just push it over to L. See if that's anywhere near where it should be. That's too far. That's going to go into the spokes. Just back that in a bit. There we are. So that's the right time to set your limit screws, but you don't. Generally speaking, you should never need to touch those again. They are factory set. Unless you've bent a derailleur, then you can adjust to compensate for that, but obviously you should just replace your hanger. But they're set now. Now the cranks can go in. We've put some grease on the shaft here. Most of it will end up being pushed down to this back end, so don't put too much on, because you just end up with all this then basically. This can go inside. It's fine. Then just drop the left hand crank onto the axle like that. Preload screw next. Doesn't need to be very tight, just hand tight. Careful because they are plastic, they can get cross-threaded quite easily. All this does is stop any slack in the bottom bracket moving the crank side to side. It's more relevant on a SRAM setup where there's a lock ring where you can take the tension up. On a Shimano, basically it's done. Then push your safety tab back in there. Tighten these up evenly, just do one at a time. We'll just run that with a torque wrench, 12 to 14 Newton meters written on there. So just torque these up. Now we're going to put the front derailleur back on. It's quite easy to fit on these. Just drop that in there. In the bolt, 5mm Allen key. I have loads of 5mm Allen keys here because almost everything's a 5mm, so it's nice to have a few in case you drop one on the floor when you're in the middle of something important, which is typical. So that's as low as this one will go. You want to basically a 1 to 3mm gap between the top of the cage and the chainring. This is as low as this is going on here, so we can't get any closer than that. Huge amount of adjustment up here doing nothing, so you can put some massive rings on here. So again, that's as low as that'll go. But all you need to check now is the alignment. It needs to be parallel, basically like this. Tighten that up, just check by eye, that's good. And then tighten this up, and that's on. You just move it by hand, make sure we're good. Would have liked to have a smaller gap here, but we're limited by the brazil. So fitting the new Shimano chains, a lot of them are sided. So you see writing on this side, and no writing on this side. So the side with the writing goes to drive side, so facing out. Normally I would size the chain from the old one, but because we've changed sprocket size ever so slightly on the back, I'm just going to do it manually. The 10-speed Shimano chains don't have quick links either, they have the old-fashioned connecting pin. For a bit old-fashioned, but they do the job once you get them on right. You can buy 10-speed links that you can use instead, but not normally necessary. So make sure you thread this around the right side of the cage. You don't want to be running over this metal piece here. So go to small. Basically, what you don't want is this piece of the chain running on the jockey wheel. So we need to be putting enough tension on it so we're just off there. On a small with a connecting pin, that would be right there. So we're losing 1, 2, 3 links. So we do need to keep this end here and take them off this end as the connecting pin goes through here. So we need to take off 3 links, end up with the inner link. 1, 2, 3, so we're splitting here. I think this is the oldest tool in my workshop. Hog Tool CT3, original one. Still going strong. 1, 2, 3, split there. That's the chain the right length. Use a little tool just to hold this chain together while we put the connecting pin through. It just takes the slack out, gives you some slack to work with, sorry, like that. Then this connecting pin, basically you put it through and then snap half of it off. Just follow the instructions online, or you don't really get instructions with Shimano components anymore, so you just need to check it out or just watch me. So it goes through from non-drive side, locates itself through, then we screw it through very carefully till it's flush. It's easy if you can do it down here normally, but see if we can get a bit closer on this one. So make sure you're sitting down on both the locators on the chain tool. Screw it through slowly, you'll hear it start to go. It actually goes in quite easily. Stop just before you've got flush with there. That feels good there. And then normally you'd use the end of that to snap off, but it snapped itself off. So that's got a stiff link now. So what you need to do now is use the other part of the chain tool here, which just relieves that stiff link. It just puts some pressure on it and flexes it open. That's that. Done. Okay, so that's the chain on. You shouldn't obviously be running in a small sprocket at the rear and a small chainring. That's cross-chaining very badly, but it should be able to handle. You must be able to set it up so it can handle big, small. Otherwise, you literally rip your derailleur off, which is never ideal. So that's the chain on. So we're just going to refit the bottom bracket cable guide. Just literally screws in, so it's nice and easy, straight. So the last bit we're doing is just this plastic cable guide that runs through this hole in the frame for the derailleur cable. So I'm just going to use an Allen key to poke that through, just to line things up a bit easier, because they can be a bit fiddly. Just run that through there, and that's through the frame now. So basically that will hold the front derailleur cable. When we refit that, it's probably going to fall out in the meantime. So just push it in there gently. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just change these cartridges for these brake pads. They're pretty easy, they're just a little screw here, but they do tend to be quite soft and quite difficult to get out sometimes, so make sure you use a high quality socket on there. You normally get some replacement screws with it, but they can be a bit tricky. That one's okay. Same on the other side. Once they're almost out, just wind it out with the Allen key. That's one. Two. So the pads then should just slide back out of these slots. So you just push this and it comes out. Get rid of them. So replacement ones, pretty cheap anyway, to be fair, so you need to make sure you get them the right way around. So there's right and left, forward. So this is the front brake, right hand side, forward, so this one goes in here. It gives you a clue because this slot here basically is where this screw drops into. Push that in there. And obviously the other one is for the other side. That's that. So it gives you two new screws with it anyway, so just refit these. Most of the time they're a different size head from the old one, just to keep it interesting. And these just screw in. They don't actually hold the pads in. The design of the pad holds itself in. This obviously stops when you're braking, the pad's going this way. So this stops them pulling forwards. So you'd have to be pedaling or braking backwards to actually rip the pads out. So I don't think they do a great deal. They're more of a locating screw than anything. But make sure you do refit them. So torque wise, literally they just locate themselves in because they're literally made of chocolate, I think. So they're so soft. So yeah, that's done. So just repeat that on the other brake. So front wheel is just going to be basically a repeat of the back, minus the cassette. Obviously there's no cassette on the front one. So there's a lot of play in this one. You could feel it when it was on the bike. So again, just pop the seals off and inspect the bearings. Let's whip that out. So that comb was very loose on its own, so that's hopefully a good thing because that's why the play was there and not because of wear. Again, just be really careful with the bearings. Magnets ready. This is looking really good, so good news. Okay, so the bearings on these look really good. So I'll just reassemble this, fresh grease, tighten the cones, change the tyre, and then front wheel's good to go. Okay, so front wheel's on, no issues. If we just get this stem aligned now with the wheel, you can see from directly above pretty well. And that's pretty good there. Let's just torque these up. Again, it's on a carbon steerer, so do be careful. It's stated on the stem 6 Newton meters, which is what this part tool is. Vast majority is 6 Newton meters. And it just clicks when it's tight. Done. Just check these while we're here. These should be 6 Newton meters. These are all tight. So that's that done. Headset all done, wheels are done. Most of the drivetrain is on. So now we need to look at cabling. I'm going to replace the gear inner cables so we can get basically the benefit of all the new bits and pieces. Shame having the gear cable snap 6 months down the line. So let's just change those. Brake cables, we should be able to reuse the old ones. Although they were pretty short on the bike. I'm hoping there's enough cable to get back through. Let's crack on with that. So we're going to replace both gear cable inners. We can get these out. Once they start fraying like this, it can be quite a challenge to get them out, unfortunately. So bear with me when I pull them through. So you can see this one here is frayed all the way from the lever to this part of the housing. So it's going to be quite difficult to get this one out, I think. So yeah, this is a bit of a mess in here. This is one of the older shifters where it's got actually the Shimano flight deck system. So there's a little actual computer cable that goes up here that was an optional accessory. So in theory, it should just push straight through there, but because it's so frayed, it's not playing ball. So what I'm going to do is I'll pull through a loop of cable here. I'm going to cut that, and then I'll be able to pull the majority out through the housing, and then hopefully push this through the bottom. So we're committed now. So that's the majority of it out of the housing now. So that's good. Now we just got to get this bit out of the shifter, which is going to be interesting. Like I say, it should just drop out this hole in the bottom of the shifter by the looks of it. Good. Obviously, you need to make sure your lever's in its highest gear position. Might not be obvious, but that's how you do it. This is a right mess. Going somewhere out. So the hole is here. Obviously, it's a stainless cable, so unfortunately it's not magnetic. You can't pull it through like that. There we go. That's it out there. So they can be an absolute nightmare once they start fraying in there like that, but that one wasn't too bad, fortunately. Let's just check the other side. We're going to take the other one out anyway, because if one's gone, the other one's certainly not going to be far behind it. So I've turned it upside down on this one because it's just jammed in here slightly, but it's not frayed, so just pull that over and pushing the other end of the cable at the lever, and it should just pop through. There we go. That's out. So we're going to refit stainless steel die-drawn cables to this one. These are pretty much the best you will get. You can get coated PTFE Shimano ones, but the coating tends to fray itself in the levers and cause other issues, so just stick with a high quality stainless steel. And the die drawn makes it a lot smoother than a normal cable. So let's see if we can get this threaded through where it's supposed to go. I think Shimano have made these a little bit easier over the years. This is quite an early shifter, and then you can see just here where it goes underneath. It should meet the end of the housing cable, hopefully. What we don't want to do is have to strip all this off and cable it. So it just pulls through the end of the housing now. Obviously, if you're going to replace all the housings, obviously you've got to replace the bar tape at the same time. It's taped in good condition, so we'll try and do it without having to resort to that. When you're pulling this last through bit, just be careful you don't end up with a really tight kink in the cable. Just be careful with it. Easier said than done. So that should be in. So just need to pull this back to where it should be, because if you try and operate the lever with that in forward like that, it basically stops the lever working. So pull the cable tension with your hand, just pull that through and operate the lever. Make sure it's pulling cable through. That just means it's sat in its housing. There's a little locating point when it needs to go into. So you just need to check that's in the right place. Just going to put that plastic cover back on that I removed earlier. So that's that side done. Same on the other side. Thank you. That's good. So that's 2 gear cables in. And we're just going to thread them back through the rest of the housing on the bike. So like I say, it's an externally routed cable bike, so it's dead easy on these. So there are some barrel adjusters that are built into the cable, which is always handy. So make sure you refit those underneath the bottom bracket shell, through that housing. Then we just need the piece of cable that lives here. A bit. Make sure your barrel adjuster on the derailleur is screwed pretty much all the way in, and then give it unscrew 1 and 1.5, 2 turns. Allows you some leeway on tension then when we're setting the gears up. Drop this in its housing through there. Okay, be careful not to kink it. Make sure you're in the highest gear still on your lever, which we are, and then we're going to just tighten this up loosely for now. Well, not loosely, but tight enough just to hold it. And then we're going to just pull the gear cable through a bit more. So that's where that goes. Just tighten that down. And we're just going to force the gear lever over. Make sure all these plastic bits are settled where they want to be. That's that. Then release. It's just the rear one fitted. So the front one's exactly the same. Through the guide underneath the bottom bracket. Make sure you go through it. I'm going to go through this cable guide, this black bit. Through there. Okay. So this black housing out, but it'll just find its own way back down the cable now. It just protects the cable from rubbing on the frame. There we go. And again, make sure your gear lever is in the correct position, so you should be down to the smallest chainring. And this just hooks over. There's a groove in this front derailleur where this sits. It's quite obvious on this one. Just nip that up. So gears should be ready to test now. We're just going to trim these cables off. So I leave about 30-40 millimeters. I'm going to put an end cap on these. Same on the back. EP1 amazing tool. Same on the back. Okay, right. Let's have a quick look at the gears. Obviously, I don't have a pedal fitted at the moment, so I'm just using the part tool shop pedal. Just screws in loosely on there. And there we go. So let's get it on the big chainring first. Shift up there, no problem. It needs a little bit of adjustment, you can hear that. It's just cable tension. And on the rear, one click, not doing anything. So we just need to put a lot more tension on this barrel adjuster. We have got one at the front as well, so we should have more than enough between the two to get it to work. I don't want to unscrew this back one anymore because it'll end up falling out of derailleur, so I'll use the front one now to give it some more. You can't see, but it's exactly the same principle. So even when adjusting the front, there wasn't enough, so I screwed this back in, pulled the cable through a bit tighter, and now we've got it to where it needs to be. So shifting not bad now. Bearing in mind there's no lubrication on the chain yet. That always helps a little bit. Bit of fine tuning on the cable tension. So at the front, it doesn't want to drop down to this ring at all, so I'm not sure it's ever been down there. So we'll just adjust the limit screw here. There we go, straight off the top. So that just needs tightening up on the big screw. Down the bottom, up to the top. We're trying to really ram it over here to replicate a difficult shift on the road, and that's not going to come off there. So let's just put it down to the smallest ring and the largest sprocket. So we've got some rub here, so we just need a little bit more adjustment on this screw. As low as that's going, you are allowed 0.5 millimeter clearance between the cage and the chain. So a small rub is generally acceptable. Let's see if we can just get rid of that. There's a little bit too much cable tension on there. There we go, I've just dropped it down. What I tend to do is, because obviously road cyclists are not going to typically ride around in a small chain ring and large sprocket a great deal, so generally what I do is compromise a tiny rub on this first gear rather than risking allowing over travel there and dropping the chain every time we drop down. So let's make sure we can go to big, which we can. We've got capacity in the derailleur, down to small. It's looking good. We'll just lubricate the chain. So it is the middle of January in the UK, so I'm putting a wet lube onto this chain. Again, it's just literally one link at a time. Take your time. And just continue that for the rest of the chain. Okay, shifting's still not quite where I want it to be, really, to be fair, so I'm just going to check derailleur hanger alignment on this one. 10 speed is always quite a finicky one to get right. 11 just seems to go a lot easier. 9 is a piece of cake. Didn't make 10 for very long, I don't think, thankfully. So let's just drop the derailleur off. That's all you need to do with that. Screw the gauge in. Probably seen me use this before in one of my other videos. So we're just checking for alignment top to bottom. It's not bad. Tiny bit, really, to be fair. Again, that way. Wasn't too bad at all, to be fair. So I don't think that's going to achieve much. It's worth checking. The minute it takes. Just got to be careful you get your B tension. Screw in the right place when you put it back on. A bit sluggish going down, so too much cable tension, so we'll just screw it in, sorry. Now onto the brakes. Actually, before we do the brakes, we'll just put the pedals back on. Plenty of grease on the threads. Don't forget the left-hand one is a left-hand thread as well. So screws in the direction opposite of what you'd expect. Pedals on. The important thing with brakes, especially the front, is to make sure that this bolt here has got plenty of grease on it. Really, really badly seized into the fork quite often. There wasn't any on this one when I took it out, but luckily it come out not too bad. So just drop that through, and the bolt goes through the back. And just spin it around. The bolt just goes through the back here. And we just need to center the brake roughly. So basically, all you need to do is squeeze the caliper on and nip up this bolt on the back. And once we get the cable on, we'll see how good that is. There is a small adjustment screw here, but generally speaking, it's much easier just to use the mounting bolt to center it. So just run the cable through to this and see where it's at. You just need to nip it up into its fitting here. There is a quick release here which will open the brake to allow wider tyres, but you need to set this with this closed. Just to save risking damaging the cable, I'm going to take this pinch bolt out. Just trap that behind there gently. Squeeze the brakes on and pull that through. Make sure it's seating properly in its lever, and that's where we want to be. So just leave off a tiny bit of pressure on your hand and tighten that up. Just check the lever, see how we're going. A little bit on the loose side, but usable. I'm just going to pull through a little bit more. Should be about there. We have obviously got an adjuster on here, but I always like to return bikes to a customer with the adjusters unused, so they have the option later on to take up slack. Right, that's feeling nice. Just tighten that up and put an end cap on. So just starting to fray here, so just wind it on. That's it. P1s. What anybody says, these are the best by a long way for doing this. Perfect. That's front brake done. just repeat the same for the back. So the back one's the same, plenty of grease on the bolt. A little bit challenging to get your Allen key in because of the design of the frame on this one, but persevere and just tighten this up. The ratchet's too short, Allen key's too long, so there's no easy way of doing it. What you can do is take the wheel off and spin the brake around onto the bolt, but I'll just do it like this, it'll be quicker in the long run. So that's nearly tight now, so we'll just get the brake centered again roughly and nip that up. So we just put that cable through like we did the front, take the pinch bolt out and clamp over it because it's so short. I don't want to risk fraying it. Just tighten that roughly. Check the lever. Happy with that. So we can just finally tighten this up. Like I say, make sure your barrel adjusters all the way in. Job done. Okay, so that's almost done. We're just going to pop on the bottle cages. Again, a bit of grease on these bolts. Doesn't hurt. Always a fiddly one. And the last one. So just the last wipe down of any greasy fingerprints. So I'm just going to check this seat post again. I've marked it with some tape here. And we'll check it's not seized in the frame. So let's just undo those. Just 2 4mm bolts on these. I've had one of these before, same design, where it's been seized almost solid, so I'm hoping this isn't the same. At the end of the day, it's set to the rider's height, so not a disaster if we can't move it, but not ideal, especially for sort of resale. That's moving. So while it's out, we'll clean it up and we'll put some fresh carbon and grip paste on there. It's fresh paste in there. And there's normally a torque setting on this clamp, but there's nothing on here, so we're going to go with 6 Nm again. And we'll just check these saddle bolts are tight. A little bit on the loose side. Only the one on this pivot. Tape off and we're done. Okay, so that's another service completed. Quite an in-depth one on this, but nothing particularly difficult. Just lots of little things like tires, chain, cables, etc., etc. Lots of work to be done. But realistically, without filming this, probably 2 hours work. But stripping it down to the frame just makes it a lot easier in the first place. As you see, it's only literally 5 minutes if you've got all the right tools, obviously. But yeah, it's all back together. It's looking really good. Just going to give it a quick test ride now. Not expecting any issues with it. And then let the customer know it's ready for collection. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. I'll probably do some more service videos. Got some more comparison videos, like I say, coming. And just anything interesting that comes in the workshop, I'll try and make a video for it. Just like, subscribe, comment, all the good stuff. Helps the magic YouTube algorithm out, and helps share the channel for everybody else. Thank you very much.